Have you ever thought about your life as a building? Something you design from the ground up with a specific blueprint in mind. Today, we're diving into a fascinating concept, architecting a life that intentionally doesn't include children. And we're framing it not as something that's missing, but as a deliberate creative act.
So let's just ask the question straight up. What if your life's blueprint didn't include children? What does that actually look like? Well, it's a path that really veers off the more traditional life script, and as our source material lays out, it takes a really proactive and honestly a deeply personal approach to get it right.
Yeah, this isn't something that just happens by accident. It's an active process of construction. It means you got to define your goals, set up the right structures around you, and make conscious choices pretty much every day to build a life that really lines up with your own personal vision.
You know, every great building starts with a rock-solid foundation. And in this kind of life design, that foundation is all about understanding your own motivations, your personal why. Because without that, any structure you try to build on top is going to feel, well, a little shaky.
Our source material actually breaks this whole foundation process into two really clear steps. First up is reflection. You've got to ask yourself, why this path for me? Is it about pouring everything you have into a career? Or maybe it's about holding on to personal freedom and spontaneity? Getting super clear on that is absolutely crucial. And once you have that, then you can move on to setting your intentions.
And this is a really important point. The term child-free isn't some one-size-fits-all label. Does it just mean you don't want to be a parent? Or are you trying to create a life where you have very little interaction with kids in general? Your personal definition here becomes the North Star for pretty much every other decision you're going to make for your blueprint.
All right, so you've poured the foundation, you know your why, and your intentions are crystal clear. So what's next? Well, now you start framing the walls. This next part is all about curating your physical world to support the life you want, creating spaces that energize you and just fit.
This slide really highlights the kind of practical choices we're talking about. The source suggests you got to actively pick environments that match your goals. So think about where you live. Are you looking at a loft in a bustling downtown area or a house in a suburban cul-de-sac? What about your job? Is it in a field that's mostly adult-focused? It's a very conscious selection process.
And that same idea of curation applies to your fun time too, like travel. And here are a few pro-level moves. Seeking out adults-only resorts, planning your vacations for when schools are in session, or even just springing for business class to get a quieter space. These are all ways you can actively design your experiences.
Okay, so you've designed your physical world, which is great. But what about the people in it? Your social life is a massive part of your life's architecture, and that brings us to the social blueprint, how you design your community.
Now, this might be one of the most crucial, and let's be real, one of the trickiest parts of this whole thing. It means you have to communicate your choices clearly, but kindly to your friends and family. Like, for example, you might politely turn down an invite to a kid's birthday party, but then immediately suggest an alternative, like grabbing coffee one-on-one with just the adults.
And you know, sometimes just having a prepared, neutral response in your back pocket can be a lifesaver. Especially in cultures where family expectations can be really strong, those questions about having kids can come up a lot. A response like this, it just neatly shifts the focus back to your personal goals without starting a fight. But it's not just about managing the relationships you already have. It's also about building new ones. Finding your tribe, you know? A community of people who get it and share your lifestyle. That can be so incredibly supportive. You might find them through professional groups, adult-focused hobbies like a book club or a wine-tasting group, or even in dedicated online forums. Any good architect is always thinking about the long-term integrity of their building. They want to make sure it stands for decades. So this final part of the blueprint is all about designing for the future, making sure your life structure is sustainable and secure for the long haul.
The source points to three critical pillars here. First, financially, it's all about strategic wealth management. Then legally, it's about putting protections in place, things like a living will or designating a power of attorney. And then for aging, it's about proactively building what some call a chosen family or a care convoy. Basically, a super reliable support network of friends and professionals for later in life. And let's just talk about those resources for a minute, because the scale of it is pretty significant. According to USDA data, the average cost to raise just one child to age 18 in the US is over $300,000. I mean, that is a substantial amount of money that can be intentionally redirected to accelerate retirement, maybe fund a business, or just travel the world.
But then there's the big question. What about purpose? What about fulfillment? Well, according to the source material, this isn't about an absence of meaning at all.
It's about finding it in different places, through things like professional mentorship, deep community volunteering, or just profound investment in your own personal passions and growth.
So as we pull this all together, the core message becomes pretty clear. Architecting a child-free life, as it's presented here, is a really proactive and purposeful process. From that very first step, your why, all the way to the long-term design for your future. It's about you taking on the role of lead designer in your own life.
And that really brings us to our final thought, a question for everybody listening. The source material frames this whole thing as a deliberate act of creation. So we'll just leave you with this. If you really are the architect of your own life, what does your finished masterpiece truly look like?